Hey everybody, I'm Beebs Kelley, and today I am bringing you a highly requested fashion edition. Everybody has been asking me to take a look back at the character Rachel Zane, which Meghan Markle played in the show Suits for a few years ago. Many of you think that she looked a lot better on Suits than she does out and about in the real world or during her time with the royal family. So today we are going to see whether or not that is true. So the first thing I want to point out is that you have to remember that this was a professional show with a pretty decent budget. It went on for quite a long time, so they had good professionals on it. They had good camera people, good directors, and good costume department. Camera angles are a very real thing. What I noticed when looking through these pictures was that there were a lot of angled looks from her, meaning that there was a lot of shots where she was at an angle to the camera, which is a slimming effect in terms of width. It will slim down the width of someone the more of a 45-degree angle you are at when it comes to your shoulders and your hips. So the way that she posed was a lot different than what you see out and about on a royal engagement, for example, where you are in movement the whole time and you are being seen from every angle, any which way, from video to photos to people in real life. You are being seen at all angles, including the bad ones. So that is something to keep in mind. Also, there were a lot of poses in which she was shifting weight onto just one foot, pushing her hip out, creating more curvature to her buttocks. There's also the potential that she padded her buttocks during this show. I'm only saying that because there is a big discrepancy from what we see, like here, for example, from what we see from her in pictures, for example, at the beach, in a bikini, or in real life, like, for example, in jeans. Her buttocks looks much flatter and smaller in these sorts of pictures, which is more realistic than they did on this show at certain points in time. That could be a combination of angles, posing, and of course, potential butt pads. I'm just saying. Additionally, these shows and the photos taken for these shows, the promotional packages, there was opportunity for the cameraman or the director to say, Meghan, pull your elbows in, put your feet together, turn this way a little bit, and things like that. So she was able to get better angles and good angles in a lot of these pictures that don't look as awkward as we saw during her time with the royal family. Just saying. And that is to be expected because these were professionals aiming at getting appealing pictures and good camera angles on all the actors involved in this show, both during filming and photography. So that is totally to be expected. The first thing I noticed out of the gate is that there was a ton of pencil skirts paired with blouses. That makes sense because she was a character working at a law firm, so that's a pretty standard professional go-to outfit choice. Her skirts tended to be very, very tight. It's likely that there was a demographic that really liked those super tight skirts, despite the sort of pulling wrinkling that you would see sometimes from the fabric stretching to accommodate, movement or things like that. Some people think that that gives off a sexy vibe, so there's a chance that that was something they just went for. I think some of them looked a little too tight when it came to professional dress out in the real world. Notice they tend not to be extremely high rise. They are definitely sitting at mid to high rise, and there's a high likelihood that they purchased or made mid-rise pencil skirts for her that sit at a more high rise, mid to high rise on her body due to her shorter torso. That's the same if you're really petite or short like me. You can buy mid-rise things and they sit at high rise on your body because you are so short. The belted looks were my least favorite. These ones just drew too much attention to her waist. This one with the brown belt really threw me for a loop. It was quite jarring. I really didn't like the belted looks at all. I also liked the mermaid pencil skirts, and I preferred when they hemmed her dresses or skirts right at the top of her knee. It allowed her legs to look a little bit better tapered and less lanky and super thin when they hemmed her skirts below the knee line. It tended to bring out that super thin leg that she has, that lankier limb, which to me just looks a little bit out of balance. Now, of course, they did get really good angles for her, so it's not as noticeable as it was during her time with the royal family or when she's out and about. we notice that more because we're not getting just one perfect angle. This look here is not my favorite look in general. However, the dark puff sleeves paired up with that lighter skirt do a really great job of bringing balance to her silhouette. When we see lighter colors, we interpret it as wider and taking up more space than darker colors. And since her shoulders are her widest point, this did a great job of that. Even though those puff sleeves have volume, it was balanced excellently with that lighter skirt because that top was a darker color. The majority of the pictures that I saw, her hair was styled over just one shoulder, which again, that asymmetry draws attention away from the width of an area, so that works well for her shoulders. Also, she didn't seem to be wearing a lot of extensions, perhaps no extensions during this time, so her hair seemed better proportioned to her body overall, and it didn't suffocate her neck area as much. They wanted her face to be seen, and they didn't want things to be overwhelmed by a ton of hair over the shoulders and coming around all the time. Of course, there was a few scenes and a few pictures that I saw her hair over both shoulders, but the majority of the time it looked to be over just one shoulder and less hair overall, meaning they didn't throw in a ton of extensions. They were going for a professional vibe and they were trying to get good pictures and make her look as attractive as possible. So they weren't going for the Kim Kardashian or beauty queen moment of tons of hair. As you see here, there are not many embellishments around her shoulders or her arms. There's not a ton of big collars. There's not a lot of she rarely wore something with like a tie or a bow, drawing a ton of attention to these shoulders, in part because they were going for a professional dress, which would be a little bit more simple and sleek, but also that's what looks best on her body type. It's more simple, sleek, upper body especially. These trousers are mid to low rise and they are exactly what her body type needs. They look so good compared to those huge high-rise pants that she was after there for a while. She also wore this sort of a neckline quite a bit, which I quite like. It draws a lot of interest right here. There was also several that had like a keyhole right here. Drawing the eye right here and really telling it where to go is a powerful tool in fashion and in styling yourself. You can tell the eye where to go. You can tell people what to look at in your outfits by choosing things that have some sort of interest, like this gathering here or keyholes or in colors, embellishments, buttons, pockets, things of that nature. They rarely did any sort of embellishment on her skirts as well. Now, personally, I think she could benefit from some pockets or buttons on the hip area if it's placed correctly, but perhaps they just preferred that from a costume department point of view. Rarely, though, you see her pencil skirts clear up to right under her bust. Rarely. There are a couple of pictures that I found where her waistline was maybe a little bit too high, but most of the time they did a good job of placing her waistline, skirt placement to be at the mid-rise point and a little bit lower on her torso to allow her waist to show up. Contrast this to her time in the royal family or her time after the royal family, where she oftentimes had things literally right here, real high up, right underneath the bust. It's just not a great look. It sort of suffocated her waist. It took away from her waist, the waist that she has, and it made things look even more boxy and square. Let's pause for a moment and take a look at the wedding dress they had Rachel Zane wear. Now, this I think did a really great job. This wide and deep V-neck does create a good illusion of thinner, more balanced shoulders. And the wedding dress itself has a good amount of volume and it comes down in a great taper. So it really created a wonderfully balanced silhouette for Meghan Markle in this character. The waistline also is not immediately under her bust. I thought it was a really good choice for her. I do so wish that she would have had a little bit more volume to her wedding dress when she married Prince Harry. I really, really do. Some volume in the hips would have done wonders. Now I'd like to take a look at this blue dress. This has a lot of diagonal lines coming from just one side. It's a lot of great asymmetry for her figure, which gives the illusion of a slimmer waistline, again, drawing her a little bit closer to that hourglass figure away from the boxier figure. Again, this is not saying that there's something wrong with her naturally boxy figure. It's just women oftentimes want to dress in a way that creates a little bit more contouring. As we contour our faces, we oftentimes want to contour our body a little bit and have a little bit more hourglass type of figure. It's just something that has been popularized. I mean, Marilyn Monroe is often held up as the icon of femininity in terms of her body and the way that she dressed and things of that nature, and she had an hourglass figure. We also hold people like Kim Kardashian in that sort of a vein, that she has that body that people strive for. Now, I don't agree with the extent of the Kim Kardashian trends for body or makeup or anything. I think it's way too extreme and unrealistic. However, I think it's also normal and desirable for a lot of women's confidence to allow themselves to look or feel a little bit more in that hourglass shape. Defining the waist a little bit or making the waistline look a little slimmer is pretty much the same sort of styling approach as an hourglass styling approach. You're wanting to accentuate your figure. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but if you're trying to create more of that figure, then this is a really great approach. Another thing I want to point out is look at how this dress is skimming her body rather than tight as all get out. She has an affinity for going for super tight clothing that is way too tight, but this skims her body. It looks so much more attractive. It looks nicer. It allows for things like your undergarments to not be cookie cutter show like how we see in this gray dress with the strapless bra moment. That was so horrible to our eyeballs. It just looks better to have a skimming outfit rather than a skin tight outfit. And of course, it's much more professional. A handful of times we saw her in something like a cardigan. I've spoken about this before, but it's a wonderful trick that I absolutely love. If you have a boxier figure, you lack a well-defined waist, or you just feel like maybe you have a little bit of a tummy, you want to hide your waist a little bit, you just want to look like you have a better, thinner waistline than you do, a great approach is to wear something that is either high contrast or pop on a belt, and then have a blazer or cardigan or other shirt worn on top open. It shows just a few inches of waist here in the center, which gives the illusion that your waistline under that cardigan or blazer is thinner. So here she's wearing a white top with a dark skirt and a cardigan, which gives that illusion. You can do it with high contrast, so meaning a light top, a dark bottom, or vice versa, or you can do it by popping on a belt. But I think that that also did a really good job for her figure. When people tell me that they think that her wardrobe on Suits was so much better, or that she looked so much better than she did during her time with the royal family, I do agree after looking through this. I never watched the show, but after looking at these pictures, her wardrobe was better. It did not come right up underneath her boobs. The wardrobe stylist did take a great approach to her body type. However, a huge amount of that was the camera angles, the directors and whatnot guiding her to pose in the correct way. When we saw her in the royal family, again, it was her just doing her own thing. There was nobody there to remind her to pose a certain way. She was being seen at all times from all angles. So you're never going to, no matter who you are, have the best angles or the best pictures come out of those types of situations. But that is why it's so essential to be mindful of the types of clothes you choose if you are in that sort of situation where you're going to be on display. That is why if you are going to be on display for any reason, say you are an ambassador for a company, or you are hosting some sort of event, perhaps a great party, maybe you're renewing your vows or having a wedding, you're going to be on display and seen from all angles. If you're in the royal family and you're going on an engagement, that is what you're going to be doing that day. So you need to be really careful and mindful of what you choose to wear. That's why it is essential that you pick things that look good from all angles, that do not wrinkle easily, or you take a lot of precautions to keep the wrinkles away, that you choose things that have a good silhouette that flatters your figure the best from all angles. Oftentimes we saw Meghan Markle wearing things that were seemingly to draw attention, things that maybe had a revealing aspect, and if they didn't have a revealing aspect, then she wore the wrong bra, or wore something that was way too tight, or just didn't fit in some way, shape, or form, which then again draws attention in some way. It could have been that she was that naive and unable to figure it out, but in which case I would argue somebody who has been to college and has been on a TV show for many years and held down a job, created a blog that had at least middling success, then you should be with it enough to seek out your own help for these things, to seek out a resource of some sort to teach you the etiquette that you need, to help you find wardrobe that you need. You should be able to think it through enough to say, I need something that's gonna look good no matter who's photographing me from what angle. What's gonna flatter my body best? You should be able to do that. You should have the agency to be able to do that. And she did have the power to be able to do that. But for whatever reason, she didn't. The current theory is it was all narcissism and ego getting in the way. Now, I will just say my experience with those sorts of people and that sort of a subject, the research that I have done on that subject, that would track. That makes sense. People who have high amounts of narcissism or high ego or big ego do not listen to that sort of a thing. They do not want that sort of help. They think they know best, or they just want to wear what they want. Or maybe they do want that attention. They do want to rock the boat and see if they can upset somebody. And is anybody going to even say anything if I do this? Like the person who shows up to work constantly getting just one part of their uniform wrong, or not actually wearing the right types of outfits, not following the dress code exactly. They're always trying to push those rules a little bit and just kind of see if anybody's going to say anything or if they can get away with it or not. It's some weird game that some people like to do. But really what it shows is that there was absolutely no reason for these sorts of blunders in her wardrobe. There's no excuse for it, and it doesn't make sense. Unless you take from that perspective, it does kind of make sense if she was just operating on some sort of caught up, ego-driven moment. And I would just like to acknowledge this point since we stumbled upon this subject. I didn't plan on talking about this today. Some people have said in the comments they get angry when people call Meghan Markle a narcissist or say that she is high narcissistic traits or she has a lot of narcissistic traits. She displays a lot of narcissism. Only a psychologist can diagnose a narcissist, which is half true. Narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, is a real personality disorder, and yes, only professionals can diagnose someone as such. However, everyone has a spectrum of narcissism to their personality. Just as we all have ego, we all have some degree of compassion or empathy. We all are some degree of every personality trait. Many of us are very low in agreeableness or very high in agreeableness. Many of us are in the middle. It's the same type of thing. With narcissism, there are people who are very low in narcissism, and there are people who are quite high in narcissism. People who have NPD only get diagnosed as such if they are so high in narcissism and narcissistic traits, and they're being seen by a professional, and there is some sort of level of distress because of that happening in their lives, which, as you could imagine, is not very often. Because typically the narcissist will dismiss away consequences that are coming their way due to their behavior, and they don't find it distressing. They aren't distressed by losing friendships. It doesn't bother them. They're not distressed by not being able to hold a job, really. They think it's those other people's fault, so it doesn't really bother them. So oftentimes, even if somebody is extremely high in narcissism, they're not going to be diagnosed with NPD. And that is not what we get into on this channel at all. Nobody is trying to diagnose anybody. But you can really easily recognize how much narcissism somebody has through their behavior. And saying that someone is quite high in their narcissism is simply saying that they have displayed a lot of those types of traits often, and that they appear to be high in those traits, just like you could easily say somebody is quite high in their agreeableness because they're quite jolly and easy to be around. Wanted to clear that up. When we're talking about Meghan Markle, when I mention that she displays some narcissistic traits or things of that nature, I mean on that spectrum, she appears to be quite high. And that is just an observation. It is nowhere near the same thing as the psychological condition of NPD, which does require a diagnosis. So I hope that clears things up for everybody who gets mad about it. And that is all we have time for today. It was a lot of fun taking a look through her suits wardrobe. Perhaps we'll do a part 2 looking at some more outfits if you guys would like. However, the show is over. It's long gone. So perhaps one and done. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope that you enjoyed today's video and that it was somewhat fun or interesting to watch. Please leave in the comments how you felt about it. If you liked today's video, I invite you to please click the like button. It helps me out a lot, as well as share it with anybody else you think might enjoy. If you would like to be notified of my next videos or have it be easier to find my videos when I post, then click the subscribe button and the bell icon if you wish. Thank you again for being here with me today. I appreciate each and every one of you. I hope that you have a happy day ahead, and I will see you next time.